So, hello and welcome to this next session. And the topic or the quote is from Keith Johnstone, the incredible improviser, improvising guru. He's left this earth, passed away a couple of years ago, but his legacy is strong. Like, if you want to be inspired by someone who's leaving messages or leaving eggs or breadcrumbs or something behind them. Have a look at the stuff that Keith Johnstone has left. And this was one of his comments. Um, Whether I picked it up in this classic book, Impro, and you might think, why would improvisation and the theatre, like, why should, I'm a normal human or I'm a working person or I'm a whoever I am, why would I need to read a book about theatre and improvisation? And so I'd had this book on my shelf for years because I'd done some improv training with Impro Melbourne and some performing. And I thought, don't know what this is, started it. And I went, yeah, no, it's not really. And then there's some point in the first few pages, and I went, oh, now I get it. It's about being spontaneous and it's about being able to string a story together. And the key part of it is about status, right? Power, which is freaking everywhere. So stop pretending to be dull was Keith Johnstone's way of saying you've got creativity in you and it pops up and then you shut it down or you censor it or you edit it. So today's conversation, or tonight, it's nighttime Australia time, is about stop pretending to be dull. And hello, welcome to Em, who's here. And I know several of you are watching recordings. So feel free to drop messages to me or in the chat, or love to hear from you during the session. So usually in these, I've been um, offering half a dozen or so questions and comments to see what do you think about these things. And this is the series. Instead of me just going, hey, here's some learning, it's a little bit more um, provocative, I hope. And so stop pretending to be dull. I've said here that Keith Johnstone said most people present themselves as if they're trying to be invisible. And whether we feel like we haven't got the energy or life's too hard or I've tried and failed, we might be cynical or whatever else. I wanted to pick up on some of the themes that surround this topic and how this is not an improvisation class. I can tell you that. We're not going to be playing games and throwing shit around in the air. It's not going to be that. I just want you to have a think about if and when and where and why you might be pretending to be dull. So I think at the heart of this is that most workplaces want us to be conformed, because we're easy to organize. And again, ask any facilitator, and they will love people who stick to the agenda and follow the rules because it makes groups easier to manage. But of course, organizations and most groups, families included, relationships included, these thrive on originality. But gee, originality in a workplace, that can be a bit dangerous. It might take people off the track and stop us achieving the KPIs that have been set for us, and therefore our bonus could be, at risk. So, from what I see around our creativity that's naturally in us, is that, and Keith agrees with me, so many of the systems and structures and organisations in society encourage conforming to, the rules, and ask any good girl who's grown up having been, coached and coerced to behave yourself and be quiet and be polite and play along. But the tide's turning. There's a lot more of people wanting to speak out and wanting to share their ideas and wanting to try things differently. If you've been conforming to an organisation or a culture that you don't think fits you, it could be that you're having to conform, whereas in fact you'd actually like to be a little bit more yourself, a little bit more original, whatever that is. What do you think it is? Because this call to, just be yourself. I think this is tricky because what is yourself and how do you be it, particularly if an organization or system you're in stifles originality or stifles creativity, how do you be yourself when a system might be trying to conform you to be an organizable group, to be a group that can, be led or controlled or directed or harnessed. There's lots of those great words that say we're going to harness the talent we have. I think, oh, that sounds like you're going to, get me all rigged up. So I'm a horse, and you're going to point me in a particular direction and gather all the energy from me. A few sessions ago, I ran one which was called Sense Making the Self. And so that was about getting you to think about what's going on in your world or in your life and what do you need to do about it. And maybe you don't need to do anything about it, but it's this act of sense making that helps you work out what's going on. Is this something I want? Is this something I'd like to change? So I think that when that advice comes in, or the meme that you read, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. What is yourself? And how would you be in it? Not sure what the answers are, but I want you to think about how part of what you're being or who you're being may be a little duller than it actually is, than you actually are. So a group I was working with last week on this sort of topic was we were exploring when we might be conscious of when we are deliberately or perhaps accidentally or in a default sense, out of habit, where we edit ourselves and where we delete particular words or phrases or ideas, or we deliberately hold back, or the phrase someone used in the group was toned down. And we tone down and vanillaize things so that they're safer. So it could be an idea you've got or a comment you'd like to make. And I know, you can be sitting in a meeting or something, and you might want to scream out, "I think all of you are," that's not quite what I'm talking about here. That might just be the complete extreme of the classic. What film was that? Where the guy rolls up the window and sticks his head out the window and says, the world's going crazy. I can't take this anymore. Not quite that extreme, but I bet it certainly happens to me. There's things I want to say, or a cheeky comment comes into my mind. And so I don't do anything about it. And I edit that because I think, it could be too much of a risk here. But lately I've been trying, particularly with one client, when a cheeky comment comes, I've been letting some of those through, and somehow I feel like we're building an even stronger relationship, and they seem to be relaxing into it a bit more as well. So we're having more laughs in our interaction. We're still delivering serious work, but I feel like we're having a few more laughs. Thanks, Em. Yeah, you said that you think the fear of being othered is a primal safety concern because we need to be in community to survive. Do you want to explain it a bit more, so that the idea that to be kind of ejected from the tribe or to be removed is could mean deep in ourselves death.
Yeah, I think it's I'm sure I read this somewhere. Forgive me, it's late here and I can't quite remember stuff, but I think it's a hangover from when we used to have to live in tribes, and if you were othered, you were really out. It was too dangerous to be on your own. What's really interesting is that I don't think our sense of what those sort of primitive fears have evolved along with us. And so now we fear being shunned from a meeting, we fear being shunned at work. Like there's that phrase, the career limiting, this is career limiting. And we
Yes.
kind of reduce ourselves to fit in because we still think that if we step out, we might get, it's probably not historically accurate, eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, or I don't,
Yes.
so there's that bit of a hangover, and it can be quite hard to split that fear for like it's all right to kind of make a cheeky comment in a meeting because you're not going to be left out for the saber-toothed tigers later. But yeah, that was kind of what I was
yeah,
meaning, I think there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a great, understanding or explanation for why. Well, it's just too risky. It's too risky for my career. Of course, I have to play it safe. I've got a mortgage, or I've got a family, or I've got goals in life, or I'm, mortgaged to the hilt. Of course, I'm going to play by the corporate rules so that I can just do what I have to do. And I understand that because I also have and sometimes have to do that sort of thing. And yet, that to me is still it's very binary. You're saying I have to completely play by the rules of editing myself. This is not making rude jokes. This is about trusting the creativity and other, I guess, genius that you've got in your life. So it's really just to spark that thinking about where in meetings, conversations, or collaborations or launching ideas might you be, editing, deleting, holding back, or toning things down. And I'd really love you to start noticing this, because this is part of stop pretending to be dull. Is you don't have to do a massive, you don't have to start going around in big plastic glasses wearing a feather boa and playing music wherever you walk. It's not being kooky creative. It's simply saying, maybe I'm holding to this line too safely. Maybe I'm being too safe. And so I am actually pretending. I am performing. And it's exhausting. It is exhausting performing to a particular, rule or culture. And to me, that just continues to enable the culture. And that means you're demonstrating to other people, hey, it's not safe to do anything slightly more creative. Again, if you're thinking, yes, but it could be too risky, I think that's an edit, right? You're already editing yourself in considering being a little bit more, interesting, a little bit more creative. And then to think of, as I mentioned with Keith Johnstone's book, that he talks about status. And so really what I'm saying here is, who are you editing yourself for? Or for what? So do you find that, well, around your best friends, they see who you are, but maybe you're also editing yourself there. I'm sure you are. We all are. And then are there certain people? I remember working with a CEO on a board of management, and I was kind of really on my best behavior. Um, and I could feel myself shift. As soon as I'd see them, I'd stand up straighter and I'd put my good voice on, and I'd be deferring to them. Oh, yes, what can I? Oh, yes, certainly, I'll help you with that. So it was all this proper speaking and don't get into trouble. Like, don't be a human. And that was like, I better do the right thing. So I keep my job. So I, get rewarded the way I want rewarded, and my career advances. And I'm challenging that and saying, the more that you actually do start being a bit more of yourself, so whatever some more of that creativity is, that you start letting a bit more of that out, you'll find that, yeah, the saber-toothed tiger doesn't come and get you. and and so there's a lovely reward system there that says, oh, that was safe, that was okay, that went down okay. Oh, okay, maybe that was a bit bigger step, right? Okay, let's try a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And I think Ken Robinson's work on, how schools are killing creativity, more great work on that. Elizabeth Gilbert's work on creativity as well. These are TED Talks and books that have been read by millions of people. It's a millions of people problem that we do know we're a little bit duller than we'd like to be. We do know we're dull. We do think we could be a little bit more something. We probably could release a little bit more. So the authority part of this, I think, is interesting. Do you notice yourself editing when you're in the presence of certain people, and think about their status? So the status topic, way more interesting than I ever imagined. But, every film, every story every show on TV, every relationship has often has shifting status, but we can edit ourselves to make ourselves smaller in the presence of someone with more power and more status, who has more control over the situation or can make decisions that could impact our safety. And yet, trying to keep yourself that small could be to your disadvantage. How do you know? How do you know that keeping yourself and continuing to edit yourself to be safe is actually not keeping you safe? It could be restricting you from lots of further advances, lots of greater success. We don't know. We don't know. We can only imagine. We can only imagine. Mm, mm. Let's have a look at the next couple of questions or comments. And this is a phrase, professionally bland. I love this because it's so, it's so standard PowerPoint template. It's so Microsoft blue, and it's just do something slightly different. I'm going with orange and black today. But where might you be being professionally bland? And at the moment, I'm having a go at conferences and trying to, shake up the conference industry a bit by saying, modernize, you fools, modernize, because they're not. And to me, a conference is a classic example of seeing lots and lots of people being professionally bland. Most of the speakers, most of the MCs, most of the people on a panel. Occasionally there'll be a highlight and you'll say, wow, that person, they had entertaining stories or they had an interesting energy or they were speaking real, they told real stories or they shared something that was, they really made great sense of what was going on. And I bet if you looked at their sort of how much did they edit of themselves, they'd be letting a lot more loose. But then have a look at who else is on the panel and which other big systems and organisations they're representing. And of course, they're going to play very safe. So I was at a conference last week and there were people on a panel after my session and they were from topics to do with finance and audit and security. And these were really big, tough, sort of scary topics. And you could just see them all sitting there, hardly moving, and nobody cracking anything emotional. There was so little humanity from that panel. And I think there was a great opportunity to share. They don't have to share secrets, but they could let a little bit more of themselves out. Not the full, they don't have to release the full creative thing, but you could see they were all restricting themselves. They had tight jaws and minute hand gestures. Some of them were like trying to gesture, but that they were all closed up. And I thought, wow, what a missed opportunity here to relax into a topic and just let a little bit out, not lots, just a little. Missed opportunities all the time. And so to me, that panel, I must remember this panel for next week when I'm talking about stop pretending to be dull. I would love to grab the mic and go, hey, I'd just like to ask a comment here. How many of you are editing and censoring yourself now? I'd be constantly going, I'd like to say this, and this all happens in a split second. I'd like to say this, but I better not say it because if someone catches it on social media, it gets played back, it'll go back to the company and then I'll be reprimanded and then I'll lose my job and my career's a mess. So that's the sort of sequence of thinking. And yet, that's a very extreme example that you can release a little bit of the editing, the censoring, and let a little bit out. You don't have to let everything out. And the last couple of questions are, do I have the same numbering? Maybe I've snuck an extra one in. Woohoo! This is really sick. So instead of 5. But here's the thing around volume, right? You don't have to be loud. So if I said, hey, stop pretending to be dull, so then you decide I'm going to start wearing Larry shirts. No, you don't have to be loud through color. You don't have to be loud through volume or through raucous activity. And so to me, that's going into that, what I'd call kooky, zany creativity, which can sometimes have a childlike party, 80s party sound or feel to it. That's not really what this is. It's how do you be a little bit more real? So to think about how else beyond volume can you be more of yourself? Thank you, Em. You've said there's probably more of a buffer than we think for letting out some creativity, for sure. For sure. The buffer is a mile wide or a kilometre wide. It's not a switch of going, I'm going to let out everything to I'm not going to let anything out at all. So that even if after this session today, that's all you think, oh, the buffer between me being dull and me being fully expressed it's a huge scale. And of course, being fully expressed may not be safe. I like that saying actually, fully self-expressed may not be safe. I understand that. It's not what I'm talking about fully. So if you say, look, there's 100 points on that buffer between where I am and what would be fully self-expressed, that's a lot of opportunities you've got to let a little bit more of your thinking out, a little bit more. Hey, Em, I'm interested to know if there's um, anything coming to your mind about where you've been editing yourself, or have you noticed it in people that you might have worked with? I know you get to work with lots of different groups and communities and companies, and for this, sake of safety, you don't have to mention anybody, but I'm really keen to know if there's anything from your observation.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to my personal experience. It's definitely something that I've done for a really long time.
Mm.
And it was interesting what you're saying about identity, because kind of as I've tried to stop filtering or stop being dull, because you can go, like I say, you can go too far. As I've tried to stop being dull, I came to this realization of I wasn't actually 100% sure who I was authentic,
Mm.
because I'd been so many people to so many different groups. I'm quite good at being a chameleon, that I'm not sure which or if any of those people are really me. So yeah, it's a bit, well, still
Wow.
continues to be a bit wild. Um, so yeah, I'm filtering myself right now, to be honest, Lynn, because you know
Yep.
about my past and you probably don't need a recording about all of my history. But yeah, there's lots of stuff that's gone on, especially in sort of corporate life. I'm probably a little more outspoken than a lot of folks would
Mm.
would be. But then these other areas, like when you're meeting new people, whenever I'm
Yeah.
around my in-laws, they're wonderful, beautiful people, but I feel like I have to behave like a good girl. They haven't made any situation, like they haven't said that or implied that at all, but I feel like I need to behave and be good when I'm around there because they're adults, even though I'm in my mid 40s. Like it's wild, just the filtering that happens all over the place. So definitely, yeah, definitely resonating.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, I'm mentioned with these topics. The reason I've put a series together, and there'll be more. I've got many more things I wanted to talk about. Is these are things I've been exploring myself, and certainly through improv and that training. And it's often been some of my advice to people is if you haven't done an improv class, at least, there's improv groups in most, I want to say most major cities and towns, and often they will run courses and workshops as part of their business model. So they want to get more people in and improvising, because that could also contribute to how they go about running different shows, and not everything's comedy. And to me, that's one of the big learnings about improv is not everything is a joke. Some formats of improv are about how do you be a kind of star of that scene or deliver a great line or make the audience laugh. But other forms of improvisation are long form. Could you imagine a 3 hour show? It's all improvised and might have three acts, or a 60-minute show that's got two halves, and it's a particular genre. It could be a fantasy genre or a film noir, or it could be a period drama. It doesn't have to be current life, hey, two people standing in the kitchen, in some sort of relationship. So there's often story going on in improv, and it teaches you a lot about narrative and about characters. But most of all, what it does is you learn over and over again that your brain keeps providing you with suggestions, and you start to become conscious of when you're saying, oh no, I can't say that. Give me something else. So often our brain will tell us what to say. It'll give us a suggestion, and we'll go really quickly. No, can't say that. That could mean, ejection from the tribe. Give me something safer. This is all happening in microseconds. And then another idea will come, but it won't be quite as good as that first one would have been. And even if we go, oh, it's not very imaginative, it's almost like keep going. You've probably got more there than you realize. So to me, in improv, the improv techniques are not just the classic things that are written about of saying yes and building on what someone has already contributed. It's about getting out of your own creative way. It's about trusting the fact that you've got way more ideas there than you realize. So you are you are being dull. You are pretending to be dull because your brain's going, how about this? How about this? Try this bit. Say that. And the more that I'm facilitating or training or speaking with a bit more recent impro training help, I feel like I've become more, I won't say confident, but more comfortable. The idea comes forward and I make a very quick decision. Yeah, no, not this audience. So there was a talk I did in Agile USA a few years ago, and there's a video of it floating around. And I was working my way through the content, and then my brain's going, ask the audience a question. Like, what? There's like 2,000 people in the audience. How do you make that interactive? But I did. I asked the audience a question, which was, I was talking about imperfection and ish, this idea of near enough or good enough. And so I asked the audience, where else are people ishing? And someone said, "Bang." And I said, what was that? Pregnancy? And everybody laughed. I said, oh, yes, of course, that could be, near enough. Whoops. And then someone said, no, presidency. And I said, oh, yeah, you're totally ishing the presidency over here in the States. And that was a few years ago when Trump was in the first time. But the audience laughed, which is a good thing for that kind of energy in a keynote and that relaxation that an audience has. But it was also me going, I trust that whatever the audience comes up with, I'll be able to handle it. Not so much like a stand-up comedian can shut down a heckler, but someone will say something and there'll be something that we can riff off that with. That I'll be able to add something, and that's where great creativity comes. Is you add something, I add something, together we get some creativity. And really, that could be all it takes to stop pretending to be dull. It could be in conversations where ideas are being generated or stories are being shared. Is share a story, drop in an idea. If your brain's gone, how about this? Try it, say it. And be more aware of when your brain is saying, how about this? Here's a suggestion. Notice it. Yeah, good one, Emma. That role-playing games are great for this also. That's right. Is something coming to your mind now? An example of a game? Because sometimes the old role-playing can freak people out. And they're like, oh no, no, I don't want to do that. Or don't make me play that role.
Yeah, well, I run Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit,
Cool.
and there's quite a bit of improv involved in that, but you're playing a fantasy character. Something that my group and I laugh about quite a lot is it doesn't matter what character you're playing, even if they're completely different, it's always got a true element of yourself in it.
Right.
Probably my husband's the most obvious example because his characters are always some element of his ADHD somewhere. Um, but it's a really those as well can be quite fun. They can be quite serious as well when
Mm,
people are interacting if you've got the right group. I'm not so much a fan of the sprung on you role play sort of things
mm.
in a workshop, but if you've turned up to play a role playing game and you've got a good facilitator or game master,
Yeah.
then you can explore all sorts of aspects in a really safe environment because it's not real. Like, so you can
Yes.
kind of bounce ideas and then you're not interacting with real people, you can try things there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Good example. Thank you. That allowing people to kind of pretend or be someone else is such a great opening to getting out of your own creative way and trying something else on. I love that idea of the Dungeons and Dragons and that phrase you used about there's an element of yourself or your true self there, and that comes up in improv a lot. Is that some of the best scenes and some of the best experiences happen when you may be two housemates playing a role, but when you do bring a little bit of truth from your own life. And it could be anything. It could be something that's happened today. It could be something that happened 20 years ago. It could be a memory from childhood, but it's the fact that it was true for you and you brought it along and added it to the creation that you're making live in the moment. It's not scripted. We're making it up as we go along. But the fact that you brought something true, something else happens to that scene. It just seems to be like fueled, or the other performer goes, yeah, this is good, off we go. We've now got something that's a bit more interesting. It's not dull. There's one improvisation game, a group of games called theatre sports, and they have a horn, like a bike horn, and there are judges and they will horn a boring or dull or disinteresting, uninteresting scene. And again, that's a format. Guess who designed it, right? Keith Johnstone came up with this concept of theatre sports. And these are all short games, so a different format. So it's sort of saying, I think it's saying, you might want to choose your mark. When are you going to release some of the resistance? There are some environments that it wouldn't be right, but there are some environments where it might be right. And so this games format of theatre sports, yeah, the judges, so there are judges. In most other parts of theatre sports, there aren't judges. No one's that judgy. But in this particular format, you can blow the horn. I've been a judge and I've blown the horn. I'm going, this seems shit. We've got to stop this. It's terrible. And equally, I've been on stage struggling in a scene going, oh, this isn't going anywhere, or I don't know what to do, or how do we be? And then you hear the horn go and you think, thank goodness I've been released from pretending. There's something that's not been good here, and it wasn't good to watch, and it certainly wasn't good to perform. So I know we can't probably have horns in meetings and going, meh, shit idea, or meh, you're boring. But maybe instead of judging others, we could release some of the dull, release some of that pressure that we're putting on ourselves to conform, to play nicely. And so thinking beyond volume, how else you could let more of yourself be, be visible. It could be ideas. I'm speaking with a group in a few weeks' time about unpacking, but understanding what their views are about certain topics and how to work out how to speak up and speak out about your ideas. And so I'm looking at this sort of scale of, you've got no interest in a topic all the way through to you'd be an activist on that topic. And I think there are lots of steps here, which is what I was saying earlier. It's not just a switch where you've fully self-expressed versus fully shut down. There's lots and lots of nuance in here. Lots of little bits of yourself you can let out. And so here's one of the downsides, is that suppressing your personality actually can reduce your effectiveness, not just who you're being, your visibility in your career. So we might be saying, I'm not going to show more of my creative self because it could harm my career. And I would say, what if the reverse is true? What if the suppression, the editing, the censoring is actually something that's making you less effective? Because it takes a lot of energy to edit, control, and suppress. And what if by being bland and being vanilla, you are just blending in with everybody else? So again, I'm not saying you have to run out and buy a pink feather boa and yellow big plastic glasses or a hooter. You don't have to go crass, childish humor. It doesn't even have to be funny, but it's when you have ideas, what are you doing with them? Are you editing them, holding them back, or might you be letting some of that effectiveness be impacted? And then the second part here is, as I've been reading and researching this topic a bit more, is that this suppressing, pretending, performing as a dull person, not as who you are, can actually increase other problems or increase other issues. Like you feel disconnected from people, or you feel like you don't fit somewhere, or there's something that just doesn't feel quite right. But in fact, it could be not them or not the environment. It could be that you're suppressing too much of yourself. So that's something I've been experimenting with recently. So it's just letting a bit more of my reality and I don't so much want to use vulnerability, but more of my creativity out with a few other people in my life. And it's making me feel better. And I think it's having a better result and a better impact. So yeah, I put two number fives in here, which is me not pretending to be dull by having everything in sequence, but it was a clever way of getting 8 points in, not 7. And so it's a bit of a kind of takeaway point, which is to that idea of, show up, how do you be somewhere with a little bit more of yourself? And to me, this is the beauty, is that it gives permission for other people to do the same. Right? You're leading. You lead other people through your behavior. And if you let a bit more of yourself out, if you test out, try a little bit more of your creativity, if you dial down the dull and increase a little bit more of your self, then that helps create permission for others to do the same. And to me, facilitating in groups, absolutely. I have to show a bit more of myself, which sets a tone for the group. So if I'm setting a tone about everything strict, and then others will probably behave in that way. But if I'm a bit more relaxed and make it up as I go along, or more improvised, or allowing more creativity, that gives permission to other people, where they go, that's the culture here today, or that's this group, that's how the norms of this group are going to work, and make it as safe as anything for people to do whatever they want to do. So if people do take risks, it's not judging what they do, it's accepting it, and knowing they've probably taken a risk to add an idea, even if it sounded crazy to the rest of the group, or other people laughed at it or judged it, is that I would go, validate the idea. Thank you. Great contribution. Or, okay, so you think this. Neither here nor there of negative or positive, more of a neutral validation, which is saying, okay, it's safe to add some ideas around here. So plenty of questions. I may not have lots of answers about them, but I would love you to in this topic around shaping change in contrast to making change, which being a change maker to me is a bit cliched and a bit controlling, whereas a change shaper is saying we could be making lots of little micro changes that are shifting something over time. And the next topic I'll be talking about is what would you do for free? So I'm not saying I do want you to do things for free or that people shouldn't pay you, but I'd love you to think more about what would you do because you love it so much, or that it gives you, maybe it's this, it helps you reduce the amount of dullness you feel or you are, that you go, yeah, I would do that even if no one was paying me for it. So I'll pause there because I know some people like to get this session one and done and get off to their next thing. And hello to anybody watching it on 2 times speed or 1.5 speed. But I'll pause there and just check in with Em to see if there's anything you'd like to add on departure on this topic today.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Lynn. Really, really interesting. I hope this is on topic. It's bringing to mind, I've been listening to a book called Likeable Badass at the moment. It talks about women have a status power, a status problem. We think we have a
Mm-hmm.
power problem, we've got a status problem, and you need both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Something in that book that like there's parallels with what you're talking about with sort of being yourself, and something that the author, who I can't remember her name unfortunately right now, um, talks about is being additive rather than reductive with yourself. She talks about like often in situations we reduce our status accidentally by muting ourselves or being dull, I guess. And she actually says like show up as who you are and then add
Right.
instead. And so I wanted
Nice.
to kind of throw that out there in case you had any thoughts on um how we could do that in this space. Or you can just
Yeah.
yeah, it's not yeah, that's the one. Alison
Yeah.
Fregel. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Um yeah, if you've got any thoughts on how you could be additive, because I really like that concept of like we're not reducing ourselves anymore. You can be your baseline and then you add something else in rather than changing yourself and reducing in situations.
Yeah. Yes. And so that reduction is editing. It's
Mm,
saying I can't allow all of these pieces out. So I think adding that is a classic improvisation technique. So if you do something, I can add to that. So it's people can add to each other. But that's probably one of the quickest and easiest ways to be additive is to see what does someone else bring and then bounce off that. Let your creative brain, take that idea and add to it. But equally, you can do the same for yourself. So I know when I'm writing notes in my journal, I'll write an idea down. I don't tend to do longhand with my thinking as a great big. It's more capture an idea or sketch it out, or is there a shape or a keyword? And then I'm saying to myself, what else? So what next, or what else goes with this? So that's prompting my brain to go zoom in on this or double click on this and go look at this in a bit more depth. So to me, additive would mean that is go in deeper onto the topic or take the topic and go broader. So you might say, we're talking about what's something I love, which is flowers. So let's go deeper on the topic of flowers, which might be there's the grown, not flown theory, not theory or push for flowers at the moment, which is buy them from places where they are grown rather than flown from other parts of the world, which makes them, a very expensive product and less of good quality. So that could be zooming in on that flower product. But I could also go broader or wider and go, I'm going to talk about flowers, but let's look at artists who are inspired by nature. And so I'm not going deep on that topic, but I could add to that topic broader by saying, let's look at flowers, but how they're being, uh, there's an artist who's just made enormous paper flowers for the beautiful Botanic Gardens shop here in Melbourne. Massive, like a massive Waratah native Australian flower, and probably bigger than that, like this, this big. So that's another aspect of flowers. Then it's not a real flower, it's an artistic representation of it. And to me, that's just going, let's look at this topic a little bit broader versus let's go deeper on the reality of it. So if you're in a meeting and you're adding an idea, then what does your brain say? Say, okay, give me some more. Ask it. Yep, let's keep going on this topic. Let's add some more. So secretly, that is a lot of what I've done today. I have had a bunch of prompts or questions, and I have let my brain, I don't have a script, I have let my brain provide ideas, examples, stories as they have popped up. And I don't do that all the time with an organized or rehearsed keynote, but in some of these sessions I do, is that I'm not planning a full scripted thing. I've got to trust my brain that it's going to provide me with some examples. And that is an activity in don't be dull. Like, oh, there's an idea. Yep, I'll share that. So I haven't noticed myself suggesting an idea and then going, no, not today. I haven't heard myself say that. So I've pretty much shared everything that my brain's been suggesting I share. So long answer, but that would be a couple of interpretations of good additives, not bad food additives. All right, I'll wrap it up here, and thanks for watching, listening, and contributing, and I'll keep these topics going. If there's something you'd like to explore or you'd like to have a conversation about, shoot me a message. It would be great to hear what else. Otherwise, I've got plenty that just, strangely enough, they just keep coming. There's lots more ideas. I'm listening to them and I'm writing them down. Okay, cheers.